Hello, my name is Mike Gemm. I'm here with Rich Waterman and the folks from Colorado Nonprofit Association. First, I just want to say thank you for coming to this webinar on Choose Your Mindset. Today, we've got a special guest from fairly far away, 7 time zones away in the afternoon. Our guest today is Rich Waterman. We're going to be talking about choosing your mindset and some tools and skills around that. Rich is a great guy, so we're going to get started with this. So first of all, just thanks again to Amber and Nick and Rennie and the whole team from Colorado Nonprofit Association. If we haven't met, and most of these names I do not recognize. So I see a few names that are familiar. If they are, great. If we've not met yet in person, we're gonna meet down the road at some point. And I would love to be a part of that. I'm one of the lead trainers for many Colorado Nonprofit Associations, particularly around fundraising. Just a quick bio so you know who I am. A couple things. One, I'm married to my wife. We're in the business. Obviously, I will be married to my wife. We are in a business together. We have 2 children who are also right now on video calls with their classrooms. Today is sort of the first official restart day for the class, so we'll see how that goes. If my internet starts to become particularly unstable, it's because everybody in the house is on a video call. I've got 2 young boys. They're in kindergarten and 3rd grade. And they may have gone unstable right there. So if you can still catch me, that's great. Kindergarten and 3rd grade. A couple of things about my own background. I come to this whole nonprofit sector with a business background. I was a CPA and an MBA and decided to do a year of volunteer service at a homeless shelter here in Colorado. And after that whole experience, I realized, gosh, I really need to be doing this work full time. And then I went to work for a man named Tom Suddes. He's personally raised $1 billion. Now, he passed away a few years ago, but he taught me not everything I know, but most of what I know around fundraising that I merged with my own finance and accounting background. And so today is an important day because for me and for everybody here, we're just in a state. It is what it is right now. We've got an environment that is completely, it's unique. You know, that word might be often overused, but this is literally unique. We've literally never had this scenario ever in our modern era of work in terms of nonprofit sector starting in 1915 and not having any kind of serious outage. You all know that. That's the point. So I want to get to Rich here in a minute. One more quick thing. There'll be a presentation of the flow for this day. We've got this webinar. You've got Q&A. You can ask some Q&A throughout. What we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Rich in a moment. He's going to do a short presentation, share his screen. There might be a couple of clarifying questions, Rich, I might pipe in and ask. And then once we get to that part of the presentation being over, there'll be a chance to go through some of that Q&A from you on the session. So without further ado, Rich, could you turn your camera on so we could all see your lovely face?
I believe you need to give me permission for that, Mike, given the current
We're going
settings.
to do that right now for sure and make you an absolute permission to make you a co-host. So let's do that. And you should be able to have that coming up here in a moment.
Here I am.
Rich. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, for suggesting we do this. And thank you again to Amber, Nick, and the rest of the Colorado Nonprofit Association for having me on, and for everyone that's on this webinar. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to give you everything I've got today.
Excellent. Well, let me do a quick little intro of you, and I'll probably turn off my camera to slow down the bandwidth. Like I said, we've got lots of people here in my house on video calls. Just a quick story. You can see the bio from Rich. A couple things you should know. Rich is my personal coach. So as I started my business a couple of years ago, I had some hard times, and many of you may not know about that, but it was just particularly tough personal challenges that I was having. And I knew I kind of frankly needed to deal with it. And I had met Rich now 9 years ago at a leadership training with Tony Robbins. And I was not on Rich's team. There's about 50 teams or so, but it wasn't on his team, but I noticed a few people, Gina, Farah, Rich, and a few others that were particularly striking to me. And so I left that community for a bit, took a hiatus for about 5 years. I was like, gosh, we need to still figure out how to share the story more broadly, this sector, and train and coach. And as a result of that experience and synchronicity, for me, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, said, okay, check your Facebook this day. And Rich was starting a group called Limitless, which was an earlier iteration of some of the work that Rich is doing now. And I had a great chance to reconnect with Rich 5 years after that initial meeting. And then, of course, 2 years later, when I started my business, I knew that I needed some help. And that's a fundamental belief of what I believe in. Like, I believe if your glass in your garage is broken because your kid busted it with a soccer ball, that somebody's a better expert at repairing that glass than me. And in terms of working through business stuff or hiring a plumber or a coach for business or nonprofit stuff, I believe in that wholeheartedly. And that's what I do today, having trained and coached thousands of people to raise tens of millions of dollars in the sector. So, Rich, I want to tee it up to you. You've been a friend. Thank you so much for joining. I love you. I appreciate you. I'm so glad we get to have your experience today. I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you to everyone that's on this webinar. I can see we've got over 50 people. So let me explain very briefly about my background a bit more and why I think this content is going to be useful to you. So I'm a senior trainer for Tony Robbins. I'm one of about 12 in the world that work with Tony at his events. But a lot of what I'm going to talk about with you today is actually a sort of a hybrid of some sort of concepts in the Robbins environment, but also some old other material that I developed myself. So let me share my screen with you right now. That's just going to take a little moment while I get all that set up on my machine. And so hopefully you can all see a slide that says, choose your mindset. If you could type in the chat box that you can, that would be great. And someone can tell me if anything's gone horrendously wrong, but normally this works quite well on the tech side. The concept is this. If you wanted to get fit and healthy and improve the quality of your body, you would go down the gym. You would exercise, you would do work, and your body would change over time, whether it's aerobic fitness, anaerobic fitness, building muscle, losing fat, whatever that may be. And the same is true of your mindset. So we have extreme external conditions going on right now. No one in their lifetime has experienced anything quite like that. Even those in our that are in the went through world wars, a very different scenario. So there are a lot of extreme external conditions affecting our brain, and we need to be aware of the impact they're having on our brain, but also to understand how we navigate through that. So I've got just a few slides. I'm not big on heavy PowerPoint slides. I tend to talk around slides. And the first thing is to understand is how are these conditions actually impacting your mindset? And there's I used to, many years ago when I first got into Tony Robbins' environment, which was about 2006, about 14 years ago, I got very interested in mindset and mindset tools. And I studied under NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming, under a gentleman called Dr. Richard Bandler, who's one of the co-founders. And one of the techniques we learned was phobia cures. We spent a day on it, and then for years afterwards, I actually specialized in phobia cures. And many of the techniques I learned are actually highly relevant for dealing with your brain in extreme circumstances like we're in now. Anyway, enough for me talking around the subject. Let's get into the first piece of content. The first piece of content is called The Chimp Paradox. This is a book published by Steve Peters about 10 years ago. Steve Peters is a clinical psychiatrist in the UK. That's his grounding originally, but then he became famous because the British Olympic cycling team, track cycling team, were looking to make marginal gains in their performance, and they employed Steve Peters on mindset, and then we ended up winning a whole stack of gold medals for many years to come, which was an impressive feat, and of which his work was a seminal part of that. Thanks, Mike, for putting the link into the chat. Steve Peters, in terms of performance, peak performance mindset, talks about 3 different ways of dealing with this inner brain. It's the limbic brain, unconscious brain, you might want to call it. Limbic brain, he calls it the chimp brain. It is the part of the adrenal response. So the whole fight, flight, and also freeze are all adrenal responses. So when we have perceived threat, so our limbic brain is designed to keep us safe. When we have perceived threat, our chimp brain will get very, very active and kick off and start to get agitated, and that can express itself as anxiety, worry, fear, or all sorts of other stuff as well. So what we need to be aware of is what are the different ways that we can deal with this agitated unconscious brain. A lot of NLP techniques, mindset techniques, and actually a lot of techniques you would learn in the Tony Robbins environment talk about would be a form of caging the chimp. That's where, let's say you've got negative talk going on in your head. One of the things we can do is either tell ourselves to shut up in the voice. We could take the thought that's maybe appearing at the front of our head, move it to the back, change the quality of it. Like, you know, my whole business is going to crash. You can move it to a different part of your head and say, my business is going to crash. So you scramble the statement, you scramble the input from the brain. That's called caging the chimp. Okay, so it's stopping that feeling, stopping that dialogue. The challenge with doing that consistently, which would be a very much an NLP or neuro-linguistic programming technique, and also Tony Robbins technique, is the chimp brain is 6 to 8 times more powerful than your conscious brain. So while you can win that game in the moment, let's say you're about to do a very important piece of work with a client, and suddenly you've got this chatter going on in your head, telling it to kind of stop it and interrupting it is useful in that moment. But if you're keeping on trying to do that over a period of time, you will get exhausted and actually you won't win. So caging the chimp is very, very useful in the moment, but it's not a sustainable long-term strategy. Another way of dealing with the unconscious response to perceived threat, of which obviously coronavirus would be one of those, is to exercise the chimp, which is the middle part of what we've got here. So I've just realized I've got my little pointer thing there. So there we go. Very flash bit of technology. Exercising the chimp is just allowing your unconscious brain to express itself. And the way that works is you're giving it a voice. So rather than trying to keep everything bottled up and just, you know, trying to maintain the status quo on the surface and yet underneath you're in turmoil, is actually just releasing some of the pressure by just letting your chimp brain or limbic brain have a say. So it's like you would basically go on some form of rant. It's the equivalent of having a saucepan with boiling water on it with a lid stuck on the top, and the saucepan's boiling. You're trying to keep it all together, but actually what you need to do is just take the lid off and let the steam out. So this could be, now be careful where you do this. Thankfully, most of us are not in an office environment at the moment, but just going on a bit of a rant and just say, look, I'm fed up. I can't go and visit my clients in person. I'm trying to juggle my work and my kids. When is this going to end? I want to get out and exercise. I'm worried about my parents, so on and so forth. It's just releasing it out. It can be very, very useful technique just to calm things down, because basically what you're doing is you're letting that part of your brain have a say. By letting the chimp have a say, it's more likely to calm down. The problem with caging the chimp is if you cage the chimp too much, actually the chimp will get very angry and agitated and will kind of get more loud and more vocal. Whereas exercising the chimp will tend to just quieting it down. There is a longer term potential challenge with this approach, which is if you exercise the chimp too often, it will think it's in control and your life could start to be run by your highly emotional kind of roller coaster emotions chimp brain. So we don't really want to exercise the chimp too often, because otherwise it's going to think it's in charge and in control. Steve Peters does not differentiate between the usefulness of these three techniques, because he was dealing more with peak performance athletes, and depending on what they need, all three are valid. Since 2014, when I first read this book, what I've realized is that negotiating with a chimp, or maybe even actually having a discussion with the chimp, is actually the more powerful technique. And it goes something like this. Let's say you're feeling anxious, worried, annoyed, frustrated, sad about what's going on right now. And you've got this inner voice chattering to you, and even maybe you start to feel unsettled. The key is to engage that part of your brain with a conversation. It might sound vaguely schizophrenic, but the reality is we all have different personalities. within ourselves, you know, one that would go to work, the personality of yourself when you're with close friends or family, the personality that comes out when you're with strangers. We're all subtly different in each areas, and it's because we've got these different part of our brain, almost like in the board of directors in our head, and it just happens to be the chimp brain or limbic brain is on that board. It may be for you right now that it's very, very active and very, very vocal. So you basically just have a conversation. Anyway, I noticed that I'm feeling worried or concerned. What's going on there? You're feeding this emotion to me, chimp. What's going on? What you're really trying to say. And it might ignore you. It might get slightly more agitated, which is unusual. But generally what it will say is, the reason that I'm concerned is, you know what, I'm worried about how am I going to cope with looking after kids and also doing my work. Okay, what do you think we could do about it? So I'm literally having this conversation back and forth, that part of my brain. I generally don't do it out loud because even though my family think I'm a little bit strange, that's maybe taking things a little bit too far, but I'll have it up here where I'm just talking back and forth to that part of the brain. Anytime I get some feedback that's useful, I'll say, thank you very much for that clarification. Next time, can we have a higher quality conversation? So I've been running this experiment in my own head for about 6 years. And what's interesting is this: if you imagine that the chimp brain is on your team, its role is to protect you and to preserve you. It's just that sometimes it's very crude, it gets very agitated, and it's almost like a faulty car alarm. All we need to do is basically just reassure it that everything's going to be okay. As you get the chimp more on your team, it tends to get less agitated less often and actually will start to feed you useful feedback. That's the chimp paradox. I won't dwell too much more on that. It's just ways we can navigate through difficult times like this by basically just having a conversation in our head with the emotions.
Hey, Rich.
If I go on to the next slide, this slide is classic. It's classic
Rich, can you
Tony
hear me?
Robbins language and also NLP language as well. And it's basically understanding what forms an emotion and how do we work with that. So the emotion's in the middle, and the three sides of the triangle are three parts of an emotion. And if you look at it, they're actually three of our major senses. We're not, in this case, dealing with the sense of taste and sense of smell. While they are both ancient senses and definitely can have an impact on an emotion. If you taste a favorite food or taste a food that you were forced to eat as a kid and you hated it, that can impact your emotions. Or if you smell a perfume or an aftershave, or maybe there's a smell that reminds you of a particular holiday that you had, they can have impact on emotions. But normally in personal development, we tend to look at three major senses, which are, if we look along the bottom, in NLP terms, we will call that kinesthetic, which is a clever word and maybe an over complex word for touch, feeling, body. Tony Robbins calls it physiology. It's basically, how do we use our body externally? How do we breathe? How do we hydrate? And also internal feelings, internal sensations inside as well. That's kinesthetic or physiology. That will definitely feed into an emotion. The next one is visual or focus down the left-hand side. So obviously that's sight, but that can be seeing things outside, or it can be making pictures in your head internally. And the third side is auditory or language. Auditory or language, again, can be external, things you are saying out loud that then feed back into your brain. It can be an external sound that comes into your head, and equally it can be internal language as well. So if we start to look at that a little bit more, again, how do we start to control our emotions? One of the things that we say in our Robbins environment is physiology first. Now we've got an ability here. The arrows either side of these emotions that we have here. If you see these arrows here, we can choose to dial up or dial down any one of those senses and impact our emotions. So if you're sat at home, I know I can't see your video right now, but just play with me a little bit about how this feels. So if you just sort of roll your shoulders forward and just kind of slouch in on yourself a little bit, and then kind of look down, maybe turn your face down as well. That is a physiology or a posture that's generally going to put you into quite a closed state, a sadder state, a lower energy state. And notice that sometimes when we take in external concerns, our body can start to close. It's a protection mechanism to protect us from the perceived threat. So one of the things that you can do every day is literally focus on sitting in an expansive state with chest back, shoulders back. Actually look up. Look, you moving your eyes up will actually access more visual clues, which generally are brighter and clearer for you. And actually spend some time just sitting there deliberately smiling. Now, you could force the smile, or what you could do is actually think about great things in your life, people that you love, people who love you, some of the great work you've done in the non-profit sector. So kind of almost like play a highlight reel in your head. So now we're starting to move into the visual side of things. We're starting to dial up the visual thing now. We're starting to bring in positive images, deliberately flooding our brain with bright, colorful images through our head, seen through our eyes, of great things that we've done, great moments in our life, and playing that highlight reel on a regular basis. Now, I would hate for you to do this for several minutes every day and make that a part of your habit for the rest of your life. It's something that I do. That was British sarcasm, by the way. So think about your posture, think about the breathing, how you breathe. I'm just going to stand up briefly for a second. When we're anxious, we tend to breathe very shallow in our chest up here. But actually what you need to be doing, I've deliberately modeled my belly accordingly. When we're breathing, actually we want to be breathing down in our belly. And when you breathe in, expand the balloon like your belly's expanding out. And when you breathe out, flatten the balloon. So breathe in, expand out, breathe out, flatten it down. By dropping the breath down into your belly, and I would recommend a ratio of 4 to 7 to 8. There's two actually breaths I'm going to give you right now. 4, 7, 8. That means breathe in for a count of 4, hold the breath for a count of 7, and breathe out for a count of 8. So breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. That is a calming breath. If you want to use some more physiology to calm things down as well, you can press into a point here, which is the Lao Gung point in the middle of your palm. Just press into that. Or you can also press on the fleshy bit of your hand here as well. That calms things down. There's another type of breathing that you can do, which is called box breathing. So you breathe in for a count of 4. You will hold the breath for a count of 4. You will breathe out for 4, and then you will pause for 4. That's another good breath for just calming things down. The gentleman called Wim Hof, it's called the Iceman. He goes and swims in ridiculously cold water. He uses that sort of breath of 4, 4, 4, 4 box breathing. So the one aspect I haven't talked about yet is auditory. So auditory is being aware, like with visual, be aware of what you're taking in. What are you watching the news? Are you watching social media? What's your news feed like? What's your peer group like? What information are you taking in externally, both visually and auditorily, into your ears? Be a guardian at your own gates. Be careful about what information you're taking in. And equally with the auditory side of things, be aware of what you are saying in your head as well. So one of the key things is taking control of your language. And there's two ways that you can do that. One of which is something called incantations. Incantations are a regular statement that you make that can take control of your emotions. So it might be words like, all I need is within me now. And you just repeat that several times a day. All I need is within me now. That is a great statement for being resourceful. You could have another statement, which is, I am healthy, wealthy, and wise. For me, that is a great reminder of focusing on my health. Wealthy, abundant, not necessarily financial wealth, but emotional wealth, time wealth as well. And wise, I make great decisions. My favorite incantation is, and particularly relevant for everyone working in the non-profit sector, is miracles happen every day, and every day they flow my way. Miracles happen every day, and every day they flow my way. Now if that doesn't get you into positive mindset, I don't know what will. Incantations are great, very useful for changing your state by having positive internal language. But the other thing to consider is to then think about, well, sometimes my brain might get a little bored of just saying that. So one of the things I then switch to improve the quality of my language is called quality questions. So what I will do in the morning, I will ask myself a set of questions, and in the evening I'll ask myself a set of questions. And the questions might be something like, what am I looking forward to today? What am I excited about today? What am I grateful for? Who loves me? Who do I love? How can I serve today? How can I contribute today? How can I look after my family today? So what I like about questions is you get different answers. So it's great for variety junkies like myself. And you're going to get quality answers. You're questioning that part of the brain. I guess I'm not unlike having a discussion with your chimp brain. At the end of the day, I'll say, what was great about today? Who do I love? Who loves me? Who's important in my life? What was I grateful for in my life? What am I looking forward to tomorrow? That's kind of that on that side. I'm just gonna double check. Yeah. So Mike's just messaged me. So go ahead, Mike. I know you got some thoughts.
Yeah, there's a couple of things.
Yeah.
I wanted to send a question out because we've gone over a couple of frameworks so far.
Yes.
And I'm experiencing on the other half of the webinar when people are like, okay, wow, I just got 20 minutes of stuff. Now what?
Yeah.
So I wanted to just kind of break, and I'm just going to ask a question to everyone in the group. What are some of those obstacles you're facing that you're encountering the chimp brain? You could have some recognition around this emotion triad, that kind of thing. I'd like to ask that question. I put it in the chat window, which you can see. I've also put the link now for everyone in the meeting to the book you were referencing from Steve Peters. So
excellent.
What are you facing? I'll tell you a couple of things that I've heard having talked to dozens of clients in the last 2 weeks. I've got the full range of, I think we're going to be completely fine. Yeah. I have heard that. I've heard that from an organization that serves seniors, the most elderly population.
Wow.
Which is one of the most vulnerable populations in this coronavirus issue.
Yeah.
I've also heard my business is completely changed and I don't even have any more because it completely depends on me getting together with our recipients, our participants, our clients, the people we serve in the community.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a broad range of spectrums. I've heard things like, gosh, I don't have any idea where we're going to get the cash flow. I've heard things like, okay, our event is coming up. This was an event a couple of weeks ago. It's coming up next week. What are we going to do? Because we've already canceled it. How are we going to do a virtual? I've encountered, how do I even do fundraising on the phone or via video? How do I even start to engage people? Is it okay for me to ask questions of people and engage? So what I'm encountering is that, can you go back up to the previous slide, Rich?
Yeah.
And please put some answers in so we can engage, because we're obviously talking but this is not the intention. The intention is to hear from you and incorporate what you're learning right here. Most of you probably on this call are in Colorado. So what you're encountering right now. So to me, a couple things I heard so far was that you can activate the cage brain, just shut up and just sort of just like push it down. You're not even trying to really engage with that. Now, this is a state I've been in, unfortunately, just too many times in my life. There are people on this call I've talked to about that. Just shut up. And I often do that self-talk, and it's profane and argumentative and super unhelpful, Rich, for me. Yeah. I've done the exercise thing, letting the steam out on the lid. And sometimes I've let the lid on the boiling pan, the pot, stay on way too freaking long.
Yes.
And then when you take it off, it's worse.
Yeah.
So what I found is, like, if you're noticing that, take it off quick.
Absolutely.
So if you hear it boil,
proactive.
Okay, woo. Just because if you leave it on too long, it can be even worse. Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for putting some stuff in. So to negotiate, you said you've been working on this 6 years, Rich, in terms of let me have a conversation with you. That was really helpful. Thank you for giving your perspective today. I appreciate that. Next time, let's have a higher quality conversation. You're essentially just talking to yourself in that way. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. It's recognizing the role. It's acknowledging the role, which is kind of like a higher quality way of exercising the chimp in many ways. Thank you for your input. Really appreciate it. Just be clear to the audience. Like, my background was high achiever, former investment banker, went to Oxford University, had to get A grades at school. Otherwise, I was nothing. This is me. My parents actually were massively supportive. I put it on myself. So I was driven for, 40 plus years of my life by pain motivation. That was not pleasant. And so actually having a higher quality inner dialogue was transformational for me. And I'm going to know some of the questions coming in. It's interesting. The way that a lot of my customers are dealing with this is to go, right, things have changed. And actually, it's an opportunity to do things differently and actually potentially build another arm to your way of raising funds. For example, we're just looking at the fundraising of nonprofits. It's another way of, taking things online, doing things that way. And actually, when things return to normal, you would then have another avenue to use, because sometimes people won't be able to come to your live events. So you've got another avenue. That's the way I look at it. Because if you can move towards something positive, then that is, I think, massively beneficial for your brain anyway, because you're working on something rather than trying to fight fires all the time and react. It's much more fun to go, right, we've got an opportunity here to do something different, to approach this differently and actually engage in our audience with a different way.
Let me just tell a quick story, a couple of questions. So I talked to a client 2 weeks ago. They went immediately into crisis mode and essentially put off the work we were doing just temporarily, which was to do essentially major gifts. I mean, if you know my work or don't know my work, that's mostly what people call me about. They don't call me about doing direct mail. They don't call me about doing events. They call me because they need to raise big money. So we put some of that work on hold for temporary so they could just sort of get things settled and figure it out. And after having a conversation with them, I said, I would be calling your people, and I would use this phrase. I'm going to give this to everyone in case you're wondering, because I can't not give you a fundraising thing. I want to give you the concept of permission. So I've had many people just call and thank their donors. And if they're getting a hold of them, and also PS, you could do this via Zoom. There's a few people who would probably just via Zoom would be love to just see you and see your face. But I want to, when you get on the phone, you're just calling to thank people or just calling to engage, just do that. Lead with your heart around that. There's no ulterior motive. You'll know in the conversation whether there's a point it's like, listen, what do you need? Or how can I help? Or what are you guys dealing with? Or that's from the donor's perspective, the prospect, the relationship.
Yeah.
That's where you say permission. Well, listen, I didn't want to get on the call and talk to you about that today, but if you want to talk about it, I'd love to tell you what, would that be okay? Just ask him a permission question. Yeah. One of my clients started doing this, and it's a bit dramatic. They deal with families, and most of their work, they're not able to actually be with the families right now in some contexts. Well, she texted me on Saturday that she had raised $87,500 in 20 minutes. Now, I don't want to get your hopes up and do any kind of that stuff. That's not the point of the story, because it's just a question of the people who are you're talking to, kind of the money that you might need. But if you're worried about it, if you're not sure what to do, I want to give you permission to call them and just talk to them as humans. And then if it comes up in that conversation, you can say, listen, we've got some stuff. We could tell you about it now. I would love your help. Is that something we could do? And you can do it in a soft tone, using soft language and soft auditory cues for them, because you mean it. And if they say no, no means no. And if they say, sure, I'd love to hear about it, you let them know what you need help around. So to me, Rich, I wanted to echo that story because it's an uplifting story. It was really gratifying for me to get a text and like, wow, this stuff's working. But it's obviously not going to work for everybody. And it's not going to work for everybody you try to call. And not everybody you call is going to pick up the phone. And you might not get phone calls. The universe, God, spirit, whatever you believe in, and if you've got that kind of spirit and faith beliefs, what I would suggest for you is that what we need right now is a little bit more, I'm going to call you and just thank you. And I'm going to share you gratitude and love. And if there's a window to ask permission for, we could use some help, then you do that. So can you go to the next slide, Rich? And then I want to start. Yeah. We've got some questions and stuff.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah. Great stuff.
Coming in. So I just want to echo that, when you talk about emotion, another word you might use could be your state, just how you're feeling at any given moment. And so as you anchored some of those things, I want to just underline this. This is, one of the foundational frameworks of just your emotion and where it comes from. And not all of you are visual people or auditory or kinesthetic. Maybe you have some mix. So as you go and think about this, and we can, obviously, Amber, these slides will be available after the session for anybody who's got that. You can take a look at it. So we've got about 24 minutes left, Rich. I wanted to turn it back over to you. Yeah. And I know you've got a long foundation slide, which could be another whole webinar. So maybe you want to touch on that, and then we'll move to answering some folks' questions.
Great point.
I'll go off on video again. I'll turn it back over to you.
And thanks, Mike. Thanks for your perspective on that, because I think it's useful to make it relevant to your sector. So I'm gonna go through this fairly quickly so we can get through to some of the questions that you posted. I was reading them as Mike was speaking. Some really great questions. So thank you for the interaction on that. I created a talk, which is a bigger talk in itself, and I'll be more than happy to record a version for the people here as well down the line. And I call it Foundations. So it's an acronym that reminds me of useful mindset tools that we can use. The F for focus is exactly what we've just been talking about, which is, what do you choose to focus on? Is there threat or is there opportunity? And maybe it's both. And one of my favorite sayings from one of my mentors, and I believe it was Joseph McClendon, who's also in the Robbins environment, was don't underestimate the seriousness of the situation you are in or your ability to solve it. So don't underestimate the seriousness of the situation you're in. So don't be blasé. Or your ability to solve it. So don't underestimate your resourcefulness. Be aware of the peer group you around you. If you are the most positive person in your peer group, then you need to step up even more and kind of be that lighthouse, be that beacon to encourage them to step up the quality of their interaction as well. Be careful about what news you are taking in. Be careful about what you're listening to on podcasts or radio. Just be aware of where your focus is going. And if you have got something positive to step into, then that's really going to help your focus. O is for OODA. Now, actually, I'm effectively repatriating a concept that was actually invented by an American United States Air Force colonel called John Boyd. And OODA, very simply, is observe. Observe what is going on. O for observe. O is orient, or in the UK probably would say orientate. So observe what is going on, orientate, and make sense of the information that you're taking in. Start to organize it, start to categorize it, start to think about it. D is for decide, make a decision as to what you're going to do. And then A is take action. So you've got observe, orient, decide, act. The military would measure the success of an exercise by how many OODAs they can go through. So right now with your business in the non-profit sector is look for how many OODAs can you get through. So observe, take in information, make sense of it, make a decision, take an action, and keep doing that as many times as you can. That'll be massively successful for you. That kind of encourages you to have structured thinking. And that kind of leads on to the next point, which is there is a danger particularly with the chimp brain, the limbic brain being very active, is we can tend to get into a kind of a spinning cycle of thinking. So almost like we start to freeze because we overthink things. So generally what I would encourage you to do is try and take as much action as possible. It's also useful to block off thinking time in your week. So act, and then have times in the week where you can sit back, take in feedback, reflect, run OODAs, and then go back to action again. But right now, action is a really good thing. It's also action that is very, very soothing and reassuring for the chimp brain as well. It tends to calm things down because it sees that you are moving. So you want to avoid this loop of just excessive thinking. N is navigate your map. By that, I mean, know where you're at right now. Be very honest with yourselves. Don't make it worse than it is. Don't make it better than it is. Be very honest with yourselves about where you are right now. Set a target, a realistic target given current situations, and then work out how you're going to navigate that map. How you're going to go from where you are to where you want to get to. And I would recommend that you have what I call multiple paths to success. So have different flexible ways of achieving your outcome. Commit to one, and if it doesn't work, you can always jump to plan B, plan C, plan D. So know where you're at, know where you want to get to, and have multiple ways to get there. That's N. Decision matrix, I won't go into a lot of detail right now, but decision matrix basically is if you are not sure about what is the right thing to do, write the different options in rows, and then in a column, you are going to put things that are important to you and your organization. So your criteria in essence. And then give each of those criteria a score. Now, if that criteria is very important, like, if you need cash flow right now, give that criteria a maximum score, say 20. If looking after your team is important, but maybe not as important as cash flow, maybe that's got a maximum score of 15. Maybe rebranding was being on your mind for a bit, but it's not as important as the other things right now, so that might have a maximum score of 10. Maybe showing that you care to your community is another maximum, that's another 20. Then all you do is just take each row, look at against each criteria, which might be, okay, fundraising or cash flow. Right, option 1, what does that score out of 20? Let's say it's an 18. Option 2, option 2 is a 16. Option 3 is a 20. And then go to the next column, which would be, right, first project is, let's say the second criteria was looking after your team. Well, the first one is not going to be good for the team at all. It's only a 1. The second option is very good for your team, so that's going to score a 15 out of 15. Add up your scores. That will then tell you, it's a kind of an objective way of making subjective things. We'll give you whichever project on the row has the highest score. That's the project you should go for. Now, it's a bit like flipping a coin. Sometimes you go, I don't know what I want to do. Is it option A, option B? Heads is A, tails is B. You flick it, it comes down the side you don't want. You might find you come across you high score a project and you go, that doesn't feel right. If it doesn't feel right, you probably got your criteria wrong. I can do another video on this. It's quite an expansive tool, but it could be a useful one for you as well. So yeah, happy to do more on that in a separate video or separate session if that's useful. A is accessing energy. So looking at what things do you do that gives you more energy, more motivation, more drive. And I call those drivers. So what habits, what activities give you more energy? Deliberately put those into your day. Are restrainers. So what are things in your life that is holding you back? You know, maybe you haven't. One of the great examples for me the last couple of weeks is our supermarket. I'm not meant to go out to a supermarket. I'm a high risk group, diabetic. So how do I get food in? All the supermarket online shopping in the UK, it's really hard to get a food in. So that was a restraint on my life. So I'm thinking, how are we going to feed the family? Then we found some local farm shops that can deliver, takes off the pressure, removes a restrainer, removes something that was impacting on my focus and my energy. So there might be some stuff going on. Maybe it's childcare. Maybe it is you've got some concern about elderly relatives. Can you get someone to check in on them? Okay. So think about what will drive your energy and drive your motivation up. Do more of those habits. Think about, is there anything that's really getting in the way of your life right now? Remove that. Theory of displacement is very, very simple. Let me just briefly explain it. I haven't got any water in my glass because I've drunk it all today because I've been good at hydrating. Theory of displacement is this. If you imagine that in your life, you've got a load of good stuff, which is water, and then imagine there's stuff on top of there, which is oil, which is the bad stuff, the negative stuff that's going on in your life right now. A lot of people try and get in and remove the oil, try and take it off the top layer, try and remove the negative stuff. I would prefer for you all right now, the best way of getting rid of the negative stuff at the top of your glass is actually put more water in. Because if we put more water in, it will displace the negative stuff off the top. The oil will roll off the top. By that I mean, do more positive things, get your teeth into more positive projects, focus on your energy on creating what you want, direct your energy towards positive things, your focus towards positive things. You will actually at some point realize you're focusing a lot less on negative things. Okay. Inner wisdom, very simply for I, is listen to your intuition. Okay. Yeah. There's a concept out there called 3 principles, which is by Sid Banks. That's Sid with a Y, Sid Banks. Concept is you are part of a connected universe. In your world, you have thoughts around that universe. Your thoughts are just thoughts. They only become impactful when you attach feelings to those thoughts. And if you're having feelings right now, you can go back upstream to just realizing it's just a thought. Something in your head is just a thought. You can control what feelings you attach to it by using the triad we had on the previous slide. You might take actions from that emotional state. Sometimes you will make mistakes. Sometimes you will do great stuff. You can always come back upstream to the fact that you have inner wisdom, you have intuition, and a thought is just a thought. A feeling is just a feeling. and you are in control of that. Yep, you can actually guide that. Linked to that is O for options, which is just look to be in response rather than reaction as much as possible. Give yourself time, give yourself space, breathe, consider your options, respond rather than getting blown around by the sort of winds of emotions that are around us right now. So respond rather than react. Part of that is the N, which is what not to do. What must I not do in this moment? Maybe make a list of that. What must I not do? Because sometimes knowing what not to do is very useful, because you can remind yourself, basically, don't make idiotic choices from the chimp brain. And actually maybe being a little bit harsher, because sometimes you might be in isolation with people, but members of your family that maybe not so positive. Who am I choosing not to be with? And I'm thinking about that in terms of wider peer group. Who am I connecting with? Who am I listening to on the news? Who do I not want to be around? So this is a concept, rather than having a to-do list, have a not to-do list and have a not to be with list. Finally, in this moment, S, what skills do I have? What skills can I bring to the fore and engage and interface with my customers and with my friends and family? Because do not underestimate the things that you find easy, other people do not. Like a lot of my kids are helping their older generations with Zoom and other things like that right now. Older generation have experience, they have wisdom. So share your skills. Be very, very tight with your standards. What the standards you are in your life. Think about what habits or maybe even systems stack up to meet those standards, and really focus on that. Think about, okay, what are the standards I want to maintain, whether it's health, whether it's emotional well-being, whether it's standards around how you work, and then really look about how can I stack, in terms of personal side, habits to hit those standards, and in terms of business, what systems do I need to stack? Because I think systems are business equivalents of habits. What systems do I need to stack or maintain to make sure we're still hitting the standards? And right now, particularly in the nonprofit space, if you overserve and over-deliver, people will remember that for a very, very long time. That's all I'm focusing on now in my business, is reaching out to existing customers, prospective customers, everyone in my community, over-serving to them, really showing that I care. Because, you know, I'm in coaching and speaking because I love people and I love helping them with tools and energy, really. And none of you on this call would be in the business you're in unless you had a massive heart. So that is one skill that you need to really bring to the fore right now, and share that not only with your customers but with your wider community. That's about as quick as foundations talk I've ever done, Mike. And I think, you know, particularly with Decision Matrix, for example, I explained that very quickly. So I will do a separate video on that for everyone that's on the call.
Right. I'll make sure we'll work with Nick and Amber to do that.
Yeah.
Thanks for going through that. Before we get to the sort of wrap, I want to take a few questions. There was a bunch of questions in the chat window. So I want to I'll take the first one that I saw around that. Rich, what I'd love you to take a look at are the questions, particularly about worry, and the ones from, the ones from Sarah and Brooke, and then also from Lindsay and Spencer. They sort of, to us, they highlighted a few things. There was a question from C. Buckley, who I think I know who that is. So how do we get unrestricted funding when we've been dependent upon events to bring that in right now? So as I said before, I think we have to be able to engage. And if there's anything that this period of time has taught us, that event-based fundraising, we know that can help bring people in. And we also know it's the most expensive money to raise outside of direct mail acquisition. Events can be 50, 60, 70 cents to raise $1. And sometimes we justify that, potentially overly justify that, in the absence, well, I'm getting new donors into the mix. And the best events tend to do a major gift ask or a sponsorship ask, which is essentially the same kind of ask in advance. So now, okay, great. I don't have this event. What do I do now? Because I need to bring in some unrestricted funding. So what I have been coaching clients around is this is the time to engage and reach out to people. I'm having a call later today at noon with a former client to also talk about this same kind of thing. So what I'm going to coach him, I'll tell you what I'm going to coach him around right now, is that we need to be able to talk to people and ask them for unrestricted funding right now. That's what we need to do. And what I have found so far is that the foundation community particularly is I've heard more about that community so far. Some of them are reallocating and releasing the restrictions. So if they were going to put money to a program grant, we can call and ask them. And that's really the thing we need to be able to do. My mentor used to say, just ask. And so as I think about that, that's what we need to do. So I give you permission to do that. And how does that conversation go? You can send an email, listen, I want to call and just check in with you about our funding, where we've been, or the money we've gotten, or what we could be using. Could we have a conversation? Could be 15, 20 minutes about that. And then I'm going to lead with the heart, connect with them. How you guys doing? And I'm going to talk about that for 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm going to say, well, here's the deal. Here's where we're at. The money you gave us was restricted for this. We could really use some reallocation right now. Would it be okay if we reallocated all or part of that to our operations? Would that be okay? And then ask. I think if you do 10 of those asks, you're not going to get 10 out of 10. But if you do 0 out of 10, you're going to get zero conversations going. So my experience has been when you ask people, they generally want to help. I got an ask last night. Can you help some restaurant workers? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because some of them are done. They have no business. They've been laid off and they're just not going to be able to recapture that with enough of the paycheck program and those kind of things. So that's one of my thoughts, C. Buckley, for that. Rich, can I have you weigh in on some of that? I'll come off video again, let you do that.
Yeah. So just talking to the talking to the some of these questions. Actually, it's more than maybe your generic response as well. Is first of all, is like don't mind read your donors, don't mind read anyone else that you potentially will be reaching out to. Is like just reach out and have an honest discussion with them, find out where they're at, and also if obviously if they're asking, they're interested, express where you're at. And it's like I think this also relates not only to C. Buckley's point, but also to Christopher as well. Is look, undoubtedly in my brain I've been considering like, can people still afford coaching? Is it appropriate for me to reach out to this potential customer when they're shutting down retail stores? And do you know what? I don't really know what they're going through until I speak with them. And so actually just reaching out and showing that you care is massively important. And related to that actually was a question from Brooke about concern about clients in rural areas. So in the UK, Brooke, there are a number of community groups that have set up to check in on sort of what we call at-risk or vulnerable people. So it may well be there's one in her area. I mean, worst case scenario, one of the things that people have been doing is contacting local police force just to go in and check in on someone. That I know that they're happy to do that when it's more remote, because my parents were in a fairly remote area when it all kicked off in the UK, and the police came in and checked in on them. So that would be like probably your last case scenario. But if there's probably going to be a community or action group in that area, I'm sure it'll be the same in the States as in the UK, that there are groups being set up now to go out and help look after others. So yeah, cool. What else am I seeing? Yes, peer groups. I saw a question about peer group. So let me talk to that one. Kathy, I'm struggling with the negativity around me. I can block out most TV and that, but people have to go daily, just always negative. It's hard to block out. So 2 factors with that, Kathy, is you show up stronger. So really you show up with a different energy, and some of them will shift over. It's kind of what I call the lighthouse effect, which is people get drawn to your positivity. And if you need to, like, just have a more honest conversation with them, saying, look, I appreciate the fact you're concerned about things. Equally, the way you're expressing that concern is actually having an impact on me. And I'm wondering why we don't want to be blasé and not recognize the threat. Could we actually spend some time just thinking about some of the positive things we could do? So just call it out, basically, in a nice, gentle way. And then there was another question from Spencer about continuing on. How do we balance continuing on as normal as possible and being aware of precautions and the unknowns of the situation in the future? And that also relates to another one about, do we carry on as normal? What do we do about future events? So what I would be doing is, first of all, go about standard routine business. That has to be priority, because you have to keep going. What you can do, keep going with that. And then then you need to block off time in your week to consider planning and strategy for, okay, how do we deal with this changing environment? My personal view is, if recommendations are coming out from the government about when they might expect this turning around, and it's like difficult to judge, leave stuff in the diary for now, unless it has to be cancelled, unless you have some significant costs around it. Leave it in the diary for now, but then reach out to those people and say, hey, I realize you could be concerned about what's going on. As of the advice right now, we're going to leave this in the diary. But in the meantime, we're going to serve you in a different way. And this is where online meetings such as Zoom and other things where you can engage with your audience online, you can actually add massive value to what you would normally be doing by serving them through a different medium. That way, what you're also doing, as well as connecting with them and serving them, you're also getting them used to potentially a different format or platform. Whereas if for whatever reason you have to cancel some of these live events, you can then redirect them to a virtual platform like this one. And it does take a little bit of practice to get good at this stuff, but not much. And trust me, you can have high levels of emotional engagement through running online things. And what you're also doing is future-proofing your business, because you're now creating another way to connect with an audience that couldn't get to your live events. I'm just going to have a quick scroll through, Mike, and just see if there's anything that I've missed in terms of questions. Yeah, don't mind Reed funding.
One of the things that I said to Rich privately on the chat was that, we'll hang on here for a few minutes.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Just to answer any questions. In my coaching and philosophy around sort of what I call my funding blueprint, there's 3 parts of that. First is story. And the second is you got to take that story to prospects. And the third is you have to ask. Story, prospects, and asks. And as part of that story, there's the organizational story, what we're doing right now. Maybe you're like Chris, and all our programs are canceled right now. There's nothing happening because we're in schools and primarily, and that's done. So, and there's no school, and who knows if there's going to be a school. I think folks like us are sort of expecting, meaning parents, we're expecting that there won't be any school. So how do you process all that? That's the organizational story. And you got to figure that out and share that. Then there's your own personal story, and that's where this mindset comes in. And so when you look at the mindset piece that we're talking about today, I would encourage you that that's a big part of what I teach and train and coach around, is that there's the organizational story, what we're doing, our impact, but then there's your own personal story, your head and your heart. Are you a heart person? Do you just lead in your just a great big personality, and you just lead with your heart? Or are you a person that likes stats and facts and data, and that's who you are? Or are you some combination? Whatever it is, just be authentic and be you. So we're going to hang on here for a little bit. Rich, I wanted to just share the final slide as we get to 10:30 here. So can you just put that up, since you've been doing that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I can do that. It's just a question. Yeah. So we just wanted to say thank you. It's about 10:30. If you want to hang on, great. I wanted to just say thank you again for joining this webinar, Choose Your Mindset. I'm a big believer in this. I've invested thousands and tens of thousands of dollars personally over the last 10, 15 years in this kind of work. And the reason I think it's so important is because I've failed at it. I've screwed this up big time. And I've totally messed up and lost jobs and relationships. And it's been superly, massively painful. It's really sucked. Fortunately, I've been able to talk to my kids about it, talk to my wife about it, and my close friends and family. And I think it's the mindset piece that got away from me. I was not taking responsibility for it at the time. And I had the skills and tools, and I forgot them. And so many of the things, like my kid, Xander, he would say, Mike, you should just use your I feel statement, I statements. And I was like, well, okay, what's that mean? I feel that when I hear about all the negativity that's coming, I have a hard time hearing that. And I wanted you to know that I'm having a hard time hearing that. And that was speaking to about all the negativity people around you. So here's the last slide. A couple things with how we're doing this. Obviously, Rich, if you want to get in touch with Rich, you can find him on Rich Waterman. If you want to get in touch with me, also just as far as, we'd love to stay in touch with you. Gemm Consulting, our work on this kind of stuff. We want to bring more content like this to CNA. We love you guys at CNA, Amber, Nick, who are on this call, and all the rest of the team. Thank you. If you want to sort of sign up and be a part of our community, Gemm Consulting, sign up for our newsletter. We're not going to bombard you. We'd love to have you. Just chat or email me and say I'm in. And again, just thanks, Rich, to you for coaching me and coaching hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people over the last, mostly in the last since 2006, since you first got in that environment and have been really dedicated to doing this. You used to be a former investment banker, and had some good fortune in that, and have decided in your second journey to really give back and to help coach people around various different things. So I just want to say thank you again for you joining today. I really appreciate you. I love you. Thank you so much for joining, man. P.S. By the way, when he said diary, he means schedule. So when you leave your stuff in the diary, he just means schedule. So just in case you were confused, you probably got that and picked that up, but I wanted to let you know that as well. So
Mike.
Yeah. Who's that?
Amber.
Excellent. Amber, welcome back.
Hi, everyone. This is Amber Cote. I'm the Director of Education at Colorado Nonprofit Association. I just wanted to take a quick minute to really thank you from our team. Thanks for pivoting when we had a little technical glitch in the beginning. Rich and Mike, that was fantastic. We'll do a follow-up email with all the folks that are on, and also make sure that they have the opportunity to sign up for any other further communications after this as well. So thank you both so much for your time, expertise, and heart.
Amber,
thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that, Amber. Thank you. Yeah, so we'll stay on for a little bit. If anyone has questions.
Yeah. If you got some other questions, just ping us in the chat. We'll be here. And if you need to head out, just head out. Full permission to go do your work, call up some of your best people and just engage with a conversation and ask permission. Say, listen, we could use your help. I don't know if you could do anything right now. If you can, great. If you can't, totally get it. But we could use your help right now. Because you could. I'm talking to you, not literally you. Most of you on this call don't know. Never talked to Sarah or Spencer or Lindsay to my knowledge. But if the people want to hear from you, your prospects, your donors, they do want to hear from you. And if you can get a hold of them, great. Give them a call and let them know.
Mike, while we're hanging out, I'm just going to see if I can stretch my tech a bit, because I've got a visual on decision matrix, so I could just leave that up, and then hopefully the guys could then build it into the video.
Yeah, you can just edit. Nick can edit that back in. That's great. He's happy to do that.
Let me see if I can. There we go. Yeah, I think it should work. Can we see that?
Okay. Yeah, you got to look. That's fancy math. You're from the math guy here.
Bit of Excel geekery.
Why don't you make that bigger for the screen if you can, and then walk us through what you've got there.
Let me just zoom in a little bit. There we go. So as I said before, your potential projects or decisions are in rows. These are different ones.
Okay. So this could be like, how do we deal with our certain program, or we've got two fundraising events, one in June, one in October. How do we prioritize? Okay.
Or like, do we start doing online fundraising? Do we put out flyers? Do we do whatever, right? You know the sector better than me. And then across the top,
it's all good. We got
just a bit. Across the top are just, for me, are just these are criteria that are important to me, actually, funny enough. So funds really important. That's got a maximum score of 20, growth 15, being innovative is 12, challenging is 10, getting recognition is an 8.
These are almost kind of values, maybe, of a sort. I'm not sure I would use that word, but it could be considered that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like
you value fun, you value growth, you value working on a team.
And you can do this on an individual level or an organizational one, and then you literally just go across and just score it out of the maximum score, fun at 20.
Yeah,
these are the scores from that one, and in this case, flexibility has a maximum score of 8, so I can score these out of 8. And then total them up, and the highest score should be priority number 1. And if it doesn't feel right, you've probably got something wrong in your criteria here. It might be the weighting. It's probably you've missed something out, or you need to take something out.
So this decision matrix. So let me come up in altitude. I talk about that a lot from my mentor. I mean, the point is, like, we're trying to get out of our head, and you just put some stuff on paper and we write some stuff down. Okay. That's one of the things that I'm getting from this, Rich, is that I'm trying to figure out all this stuff. And you can't figure it out all here. You just got to put on pen and paper sometimes.
Get it down.
So we dump it down, and then we kind of prioritize it according to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's absolutely right. It's overwhelm it kind of feels like it's up here and inaccessible. So if you can take it down out of your head and get it down, it's still subjective, right? But we're making it more objective so we can able to. Well, it's a great way of seeing multiple potential projects or ideas and going, right.
Yeah.
Let me have a structure to making a decision. So that's decision matrix. So,
hey, Rich, there's been a request to have you email this simple Excel file to the team. So if you can send that to me, I can, if it's okay. I'd be happy to get that. Would that be okay with you? He's like, that's your sarcasm meter coming out, brother. I can tell that a little bit.
We do love a bit of sarcasm in the UK. Yeah.
Yes.
Copyright Rich Waterman, Esquire. Yeah, no, that's all good. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Be
Fantastic.
very, very happy to email this out.
Happy to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Are there any other questions from folks? And we're happy to stay on and take that. There's been, 40% of the group that's still here with us. So if you're still here with us, thank you. And if you're still here with us, I want to underline something Rich said. This is a time right now, we need to see things as they are, not worse than they are, and not necessarily better than they are yet. So the first thing is like, what's reality? Where's point A? Where am I at right now? Okay, my programs are canceled, cash flow is terrible, and I have no money coming in. Okay, great. We don't need to add and stack emotion to that, but that's sort of where we're at right now. Okay, then we can do that, and you got to do that unemotionally if you can. And then we look at, okay, great, where do we want to be? That's where we're going. So step one is to see where you're at, just where you're at, factual. Confront the brutal facts, as Admiral Stockdale talks about in Good to Great several years ago from that book, 20 years ago, probably. Now, where do we want to be? And then there's a gap, and you got to figure out how to bridge that gap. Yeah. That's the steps. So just as you're thinking about stuff, take the thinking time. See where am I at right now? If it's really hard and super terrible, I get it. I mean, I got a client who's just like, what am I going to do with all my employees? There's no programs. We're completely attached to the schools and school system. There's no kids, nothing. This stuff virtually, we're figuring out a few things, but it's 10% max of what it was. That's pretty bad. Okay, got it. Now, where do you want it to be? And you're probably going to need to say, okay, well, what's the reality going to allow me to do in terms of where I can go? And then you cross that gap. If you can consistently do that, and I would say it's an 80-20 rule. Take 80% of your time and focus on your current operations, whatever those currently are. And Rich, you mentioned the thinking time concept from our mentor, Keith Cunningham. That's the 20% of the time, which, essentially could be, it doesn't even need to be 20%. It could be 4 hours a week, 10% of your time if you're doing 40 hours. Yeah. It could be 4, 6, 8 hours. Take some extra time to do that. Yeah. Rich, it looks like there's not any other questions. Julie had her one question in the Q&A. So what I'll probably do is I just want to say thank you one more time, man. I appreciate you. We were supposed to see you last week in all of our privilege. Listen, there'd be plenty of people who would love to take a trip to London. So it's not a pity party for Gemm here. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. I missed you. I haven't seen you in several years. We were looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again in the future in person. And until that time, we'll see each other on Zoom, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you for your kind words. Yeah, look forward to catching up with you in person. And those that are on the call, we've got a few left. I really genuinely want to thank you all for the work that you do. I really want to thank you for going out there and being the difference for people, and keep going. The world needs you all. And I really hope that this was of value to you, and that you can, even if it's just one little nugget you can take away and go and use it. Thank you. Go keep doing good. And I'm extremely proud to have been invited to talk to such a wonderful group of people. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, with that, Amber, we'll turn it back over to you. We'll sign this meeting off, and thank you, team. Go forth and have some impact. And if you're not having it right now, reimagine, create. And if that still doesn't work, maintain your mindset.